Welcome into another edition of New Track Record. Caleb Hatch with you and Justin Kinney joining us from an undisclosed location. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Mr. Hatch. I'm way out west in Colorado, still working on putting together a Denver street race. So the wheels are in motion, but I'm out here, boots on the ground, to try to make things happen.
So I assume you're meeting with like Pepsi and other power players in Denver right now to try to get that deal hammered through.
Yeah, we've been exchanging texts for a long time, but now it's time to really get some signatures on some paper. So hopefully we'll have some results to announce here on next week's show. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, we'll see. So Justin out in Colorado. So we've now disclosed the location. We have a race to recap, a doubleheader race weekend to preview, plenty to dive into this week on the show. So let's start with Toronto, the Honda Indy Toronto from Exhibition Place last weekend. Christian Lundgaard gets his first IndyCar Series win. Always fun to see a first-time winner. Rahal Letterman Lanigan, what a turnaround for them this season as well. Alex Palou nursing a broken front wing, ends up on the podium to finish second. Colton Herta gets his first podium of the season, coming home in third, and it was fuel miscalculations by some top teams as Marcus Ericsson had to pit late. He ended up finishing 11th. Will Power also had to pit late, so he was looking like a potential podium finisher. He ends up in 14th. So we dive into our three things, and I think the obvious starting point is just the Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing team as a whole. Christian Lundgaard getting the win, won the pole after a wild qualifying session that had Group 1 in the dry, then the rest of qualifying in the wet. He wins the pole for that. And then just perfection the rest of the race, right? They manage everything. They manage tires. They manage pit stops. That was the one thing that hurt Graham Rahal at Mid-Ohio as he, had a slow pit stop or two, and that dropped him out of contention in that race. They got everything right this weekend. And if you would have told me back in May that this Rahal team would not only, win another pole this year, after Lundgaard won at the GP, but also would win a race, I would have said you're crazy. But this turnaround has just been something to see. And this is a Rahal team that has more race wins on the year than McLaren, the same as Andretti. I mean, I never would have thought that going back to qualifying for the Indy 500.
Not at all. And the tone was set in qualifying, and I think that's a fascinating what if, is if qualifying is in the dry, does Christian Lundgaard put it on the pole? But circumstances worked out for Rahal Letterman Lanigan for once, and Lundgaard was able to put it on pole, and everything worked for him in going forward throughout that race based on decisions that he made and also decisions that other drivers made or teams made for whatever reason. But just a phenomenal drive, and we've said it before that Lundgaard is the number one driver, in our opinion, at Rahal Letterman Lanigan. And I think he proved that last weekend and has been as good of a driver as anybody on that team and better this season. We saw it with Sainz last year, and for him to break through, get that win, and probably most importantly, able to shave off that disgusting mustache in victory lane.
Yeah, I mean, that was off so quick. And I think we're all the better for it that we don't have to look at Christian Lundgaard's trash stash anymore.
Yeah, it was pretty. Some people can pull it off for sure. He cannot pull it off.
No.
Glad it's gone.
And it's crazy. I mean, he's 20 years old, 21 years old. I mean, he is
21. Yeah.
He is a driver that I think we all saw this coming. I mean, before the season, right? We talked about guys who could get a first-time win, and he was, I think, number one on my list as far as drivers. And to see this team get back to victory lane after not having been there since Takuma Sato's Indy 500 win back in 2020, I mean, it's hard to believe it was that long of a gap. And they have a clear number one driver, as you mentioned. And at Iowa this weekend, I mean, yes, this will be a different discipline. I think the next step for Lundgaard is to be more consistent as a championship contender. And right now he's doing a solid job. He's up to 7th in points, and Graham Rahal finished 7th in points several times with that team for the last handful of years. But now it's, okay, can he adapt on the ovals? That's the next step, and we'll see what kind of step he can take this weekend. But also, you would expect this to be a weekend where, could they struggle again just because they struggled on ovals previously this year, and, can Graham Rahal carry that team this weekend? We'll see. But for now, all positive things. They made a ton of progress. Still feel like they have a ways to go, but this is a huge step that they made over the weekend in Toronto.
I think that's the thing is people now, RLL is back or whatever with this win. It's a step forward, but it doesn't all of a sudden make them a consistent contender each and every week. It shows just the direction that the team is going in a positive way after the struggles early on in the season and even last year and all that, of course, that really came to a head at Indianapolis in May. But I think this is a step forward for the team getting a dub. I think it shows further that Christian Lundgaard is deserving of a long-term contract extension for RLL before some other team swoops in and grabs him. And I think it's just another indication that the changes and the moves that Bobby Rahal made after Indianapolis are bearing fruit. But I don't think all of a sudden we're looking at RLL being a consistent contender with two cars, Jack Harvey, each and every week.
Yeah, and I think even Bobby, admitted that we've made progress. This is good, but we have 2 races this weekend. There's a lot more progress to go. I just think what the team did mid-season, making changes, it's easy to fire people, right, when things are going poorly, but it's a lot tougher to then put people in the right spots and have them succeed. And it's beyond just the drivers, right? It's management, it's pit crews, it's everything. Everyone plays a role. And they did this complete reset mid-season, which is really hard to do for a team. There's no, big break, or there's no one working back at the factory like in F1, to improve pieces and bits on the car. You don't have that in IndyCar. You have what you have. And in a series this competitive, it's really impressive to see the progress they've made just since Indy and even really since Detroit, where they also really struggled. And so this team to be back, fighting for wins and fighting for poles. I mean, Christian Lundgaard's a great driver, and they're lucky they have him signed for next year because if he were on the market, he'd be a top commodity.
I agree, and I think you look at it, too, with their damper program. Marshall Pruitt's mentioned that about how they've doubled down on that, and that definitely helps out in season in terms of improvement. But overall, this is a group that's heading in the right direction, and nothing really gives you that that feeling of, hey, these are the right decisions. We're moving forward in a positive light. Then a dub, and it was just cool to see. And it ends, the 2+ year streak of no team outside the top 4 winning a race, dating back to Elio's win at the 500. So
yeah,
that was cool to see as well, because for a while we've talked about how there's only 4 teams capable of winning a race in this series for the better part of 2 years. And Christian Lundgaard and RLL put that to sleep, put that to bed, at least for now, last weekend in Toronto.
Absolutely. It's a great point to add as well. All right, what's your number one?
Well, I think my number one is let's talk about the event in general, because during COVID, this was looked at as, man, does this thing continue? With the hurdles that IndyCar had to go through during COVID, with the rules in Canada. We talked about even before that about Exhibition Place and the expansion around the area and how that was impacting the race in a negative light, and were they going to have to move the race? Was the race going to go away completely? And yet here we are this past weekend, once again, a huge crowd, biggest since 1999 was the report. And it just seems like now it's become, in the span of 2 years, one of the, in my opinion, top 5 events in terms of popularity in the entire series, at least with fans attending. And it's pretty damn cool. And hopefully, if this continues, IndyCar can try harder to find a second race in Canada. And I know it takes 2 to tango, but it just feels like it's long overdue. And with Toronto seemingly becoming a bigger and bigger event with each passing year in recent years, you would hope that somebody in Canada would step up and say, hey, maybe it's a good idea if we host a race, and IndyCar can zero in on a deal, because it's pretty cool what Toronto has become after the uncertainty around COVID.
Absolutely. And to have an event like Toronto that was gone for not 1 year, but 2 years, right? And to be back and last year, it was a return, but you just wonder, will this stick? But it's almost like you take something away and people miss it, and then you bring it back. And we've seen that at several places this year. I mean, if you were to rank, top 5 events, obviously Indy 500 is number 1, Long Beach is number 2, Road America's 3. After that, though, is it St. Pete? Is it Barber? Toronto's on that short list. As far as Nashville, crowd support, buzz, all those things. And Toronto's quickly kind of moved itself back up the pecking order after a couple years off. And it's great to see, but man, wouldn't it be great to see 3 Canadian races as opposed to just one? One in Montreal or Mont-Tremblant, and then one somewhere in Western Canada, whether it's Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, somewhere out in Western Canada to help those people out. I think that'd be huge. Now, we're a long ways away from that, but that's an ideal world where we're talking a 20-race schedule, and 3 are in Canada, 1 in Mexico, maybe 1 other in South America, and then obviously the rest domestic. But Toronto's success gives me hope that the Canadian fan base isn't going anywhere, and that we're maybe underselling, kind of the value they bring to the series.
It can only be positive for what we're seeing out of Exhibition Place and the Honda Indy Toronto, both on the series, the city of Toronto, the event itself, and then hopefully interest elsewhere in Canada for a race. So it's just pretty cool from what it's become, because even before COVID, it was like, man, all these expansions around Exhibition Place, that they're going to have to move where it's raced in Toronto. Can they all agree on where it would be raced in Toronto? Because that was never assured. They always said, man, if Exhibition Place continues to expand, we're going to have to move this race. And is there anywhere in Toronto? It's easy to say, well, they can put it somewhere else in Toronto. But as we know, street courses aren't easy to put together with the red tape and the businesses, whether they're going to be on board or not around the race course. So that wasn't a guarantee, but they've made it work as of now around Exhibition Place. As the grid continues to expand, it becomes more and more difficult, but they continue to figure it out. And you just hope, if this momentum can continue in Toronto, hopefully within, 3 to 5 years, we could have a second Canada race somewhere. And yeah, I think Western Canada would be the play, at Edmonton or Vancouver or something. And that only can come to fruition if, first things first, Canadian race fans continue to invade Toronto in the numbers they have the last couple of years. You look at it too, Caleb, and was the best thing for this event not having it for 2 years?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like, I understand it's not the best thing for the promoter, but obviously
not ideal, but
obviously though, that in a way though, just like we saw with the Indy 500 in crowds, right? You have limited crowds or no crowds like you had in 2020, limited in 21. And then we've seen the crowds go back to the level they were, pre-split, or at least, back 20 years ago, before the crowds really started dropping off, after about 2003. Like, we're seeing events go back to the crowds and the buzz that they had. Like the Indy 500 this year, the buzz leading into it was the biggest I had felt in years. Really in my lifetime that I can really recall, because I was too young to remember pre-split Indy 500s, and there was so much buzz, and the buzz was back, and buzz is clearly back in Toronto. And all the hand wringing in the off season for, I talked about other top events, but Mid-Ohio would definitely be another one of those. But, worried about pit stalls for Mid-Ohio and Toronto, they found a way to make it work, right? And as long as they continue to do that, I think you can make this track work.
Yeah, they've done a great job, and it's just pretty cool to see. And even a couple of years ago, you felt like, okay, Toronto, it's kind of a throwaway race. Oh, it's on Peacock only, whatever. But man, it has become a truly big event, not seen for the better part of 20, 25 years, when it was the Molson Indy Toronto. It's been absolutely huge, and it's great to see. So that was my top take out of the weekend.
I'm going to go, my number 2 is the guy who finished number 2. No surprise, Alex Palou. I get that he won 3 races in a row. He's won 4 races on the season. Indy 500 pole winner. This, to me, though, these are the type of drives when you drive from 15th to 2nd, you throw in the broken front wing as another obstacle. This is the kind of drive that wins you a championship, right? And I get it. He has a massive points lead. I understand. But this is the drive we'll look back at the end of the year. And if anyone closes in on him, if he even struggles at Iowa, like this is the race that far and away, this is your IndyCar champion for 2023 because of what he did on Sunday in those closing laps. The wing's starting to fall off. It's hanging on by the vinyl wrap, right, for the car. This was just a phenomenal drive by him. I thought that front wing was going to fail, with 5 laps to go, with 4 laps to go, with 3 laps to go, with 2 laps to go, with 1 lap to go. Didn't happen, and Alex Palou gets a second-place finish and ends up extending his championship points lead. Just an unbelievable performance by him.
It's the stars have aligned, right? Because you need a little bit of luck to win a IndyCar championship, and he's done it so much up till now on skill, but he had a little luck last week with that wing. He could have, and having to avoid Elio, any more impact than what he had probably at least have him come in and put a new wing on. But even under the caution, didn't happen, held on, actually improved his positioning, got up to second, and that's just the season that we've seen out of Alex Palou. And God love NBC, but can we stop talking about the championship, at least after this weekend? Iowa's going to be big. If he has 2 terrible races this weekend, maybe it opens the door up, but that's not going to happen. You're lucky to get 1 this weekend, but after this weekend, can we just stop talking about the championship? I would really love to see the NBC start breaking down the point standings as they go from 22 back in the battle for the leader's circle. Like, that's going to be more interesting down the stretch than Alex Palou atop the championship, and people try to catch him. After this weekend, if he's not in a position, if he's got a 100-point-plus lead after this weekend, it's all but over.
Yes, and look, it's going to take a DNF or 2 finishing positions outside the top 20 and someone dominating the weekend, like, say, Joseph Newgarden, like he nearly did last year, nearly winning both. Like, it's going to take that kind of effort to, for the championship to be even on the table again. And we joke all the time, right, about Scott Dixon luck. Maybe we need to translate and change that to Alex Palou luck, because that was my takeaway with his drive on Sunday.
I think we're in a position too, and remember this with the championship, is we're not in a position to say, okay, Scott Dixon needs to get on a heater or whoever. It's Alex Palou needs to completely fall apart. That's the big thing with this, is it's not somebody else getting hot. It's they need the leader to just completely fall apart. And so far, that hasn't even been close to happening, nor do I see it happening. Alex Palou's due for a race where he finishes 23rd or something like that, but I don't see that happening in consecutive races or just a complete fall-off in the second half of the season. And I keep coming back to this, Caleb, as we look at this and the dominant performance that Alex Palou has put together in 2023, and you say, man, is he really going to walk away from this team? Because Alex Palou is of utmost potential, and he's delivering, but that team is too. And by all indications, after Laguna Seca, he's gone.
And that's such an interesting thing, because you hear different things. You hear murmurs around the paddock. I think they said on Peacock over the weekend, they're like, oh, there's a chance he comes back with Ganassi. Then, I hear from IndyCar Deep Throat, oh, he's been long gone, for over a year. Like, it's just a matter of time as far as moving on to McLaren. And then, of course, there's that added third factor. We talked about it last week as far as Alex Palou and F1. Does he have an opportunity with perhaps an AlphaTauri for 2024? There's so many things at play, and we're probably not going to have an answer on any of it until at the earliest, Portland or Laguna Seca. So we're talking the last 2 races of the year. But nonetheless, I guess we got to enjoy the ride and maybe not worry about where he's going next year, because this is a dominating performance we haven't seen in IndyCar since, Tony Kanaan in 2004 or Dan Weldon in 2005. This is historic, what we're seeing.
It absolutely is, and nothing short of impressive. If he's off to F1 next year, a great move. You have to do it. But, man, if he's just to McLaren, a team that still has yet to win a race this season, still waiting for that breakthrough from McLaren across their entire operation, man, it's difficult. We felt like, well, okay, Pato O'Ward eventually is going to break out. He really hasn't. Then we go, okay, well, Alexander Rossi is going to be with McLaren. Then he'll and the team will break out. That really hasn't. Do we expect that then to happen if Alex Palou is there? The expectation is it does, but it hasn't with Pato O'Ward, and it hasn't with Alex Rossi.
What is your next takeaway?
Can we talk about the screw-ups of some of the top teams?
Yes, please.
And it starts with Scott McLaughlin, and yeah, McLaughlin and the team said all the right things after the race, ended up finishing sixth, blah, 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 but he was the dude through the first half of the race that could challenge Christian Lundgaard, and threw that away by staying out on the primary tires in that whole sequence. And that's really the sequence in which Christian Lundgaard won the race, because Scott McLaughlin was trying to stay out on primaries up front and put together laps that would kind of close the gap with Christian Lundgaard once his alternates went away, and he was in traffic, and that didn't happen. From a combination of McLaughlin not being able to put the lap times together that they thought they could on the primaries, plus Christian Lundgaard's ability to consistently put up lap times on the alternates in traffic, that distance between those two drivers never increased above like 16, 17 seconds. And that doomed Scott McLaughlin, and it really put Christian Lundgaard in the catbird seat. And it was a bad decision. It was kind of softened by the fact that McLaughlin was able to finish sixth, but overall it screwed him out of a chance to potentially win that race. And that just set the tone for the last lap pit stops for Will Power and Marcus Ericsson. These aren't bad teams or middle of the road teams that had to make these stops. This is Penske, Ganassi making these decisions and not making fuel, and it cost them. And it was just interesting to see, because you don't see that happen to Penske or Ganassi and making bad decisions in strategy at Penske. But we saw that last weekend.
Toronto is a race weekend I look forward to every year because it always has the opportunity to turn into a chaos race. We've seen so many great moments over the year, Dixon and Dario tangling, way back, Bourdais and Tracy tangling, right? There's been so many great moments. And part of it's because it's a street circuit, right? So you're going to have more crashes. But also, I will give this a slight pass, but it was still, even on the broadcast, they called it out. Like, what is Penske doing as far as the strategy? It is shocking there were no yellows, though, after lap 50, after the contact between Elio and Kirkwood. That was it. There were no yellows to the end. That's not normal. However, like, you had an opportunity to come in and pit and make yourself, good to go to the end, and yet you didn't take that chance. And I'm not sure between that move with McLaughlin's crew or the fact that somehow Will Power, who is, to our knowledge, right, not told to fuel save, and we're thinking, oh, Will Power's going to get a podium, could he even get up to second place? And then suddenly, boom, he's in the pits with like a lap or two left. Like, it was stunning to see that happen, as you mentioned, with top teams. And then there's the Rahal team. Christian Lundgaard ran essentially a perfect race. It was a perfect weekend. Just a phenomenal job by him and the team getting it right.
It was a great job, and for every accolade that goes to Christian Lundgaard for figuring it out, you have so many questions about why the other top teams couldn't. And it was, in a way, it was a bit enlightening. It was a bit encouraging to see that, hey, even the top teams can screw up. And I think that's what makes Alex Palou's dominance this season even more impressive, is despite starting where he started, and 15th. You felt like, okay, in qualifying, it finally bit Alex Palou that the rain came when it came while he was on a flyer, couldn't advance, and you felt starting in 15th, this is the weekend. And that team and Alex Palou put together a hell of a plan and a hell of a drive to finish runner-up, and yet you look elsewhere and you say, well, part of it was helped by Scott McLaughlin's screw-up and also the late pits stops that were needed with Marcus Ericsson and Will Power.
All right. Is it time for my number 3?
It is time for your number 3. Yes, sir.
Oh man, this is where it gets tough. You know what? I'm thinking positive here. We talked a lot about Christian Lundgaard with Team Rahal, but I want to highlight 2 other drivers in particular. First off, Graham Rahal. I can't believe we haven't talked about this yet. His reverse maneuver, they even tweeted, I think the team account tweeted, put it in reverse, Terry, and showed the video of him going in reverse after the first lap pileup, cutting through the escape route, continuing on. I mean, that was just absolutely genius. I think people don't understand how tough it is for these cars to go in reverse in the first place. So the fact that he was able to pull that off and not stall the car and then continue on through the escape route, I mean, that was just phenomenal driving. And it wasn't just that, right? That put him in 20th. He had to drive through the field, started dead last, finished 9th. Again, as always, if Graham Rahal could only qualify well, right? And yes, he did that front row at Mid-Ohio, and unfortunately pit stops took him out of contention there. But man, just an absolute phenomenal drive to finish in 9th in this one. And yes, first lap pile up, that helps you a lot, but you still got to race your way past, that 20th spot on. And just a phenomenal drive by Graham. We seemingly talk about this nearly every week. I think this weekend at at Iowa, you have to think he's a contender, right? Based on his experience. And then another driver I wanted to highlight, I get it. I'm doing 2 drivers instead of 1 here. Agustin Canapino. I mean, how many times have we said this throughout the season? Just he's doing everything right. And I get it. It's only a 12th place finish that ties his season best. But man, I've been so impressed by him. This is his 3rd 12th place finish on the year. First 2 races he was 12th, and that was especially impressive doing so at Texas and then in his first race on a street circuit. But the maturity, I think we underrated the maturity aspect of his lack of experience in open wheel cars and in formula style cars. But the fact that he's 33 years old, he's driven a lot of races. He knows, when to go for things and when to let them settle. And for him, I mean, it's a huge result. 12th doesn't sound like a lot, but 12th is massive when you're in 21st in points. And you go back to the entrant point standings. I believe he's 20th because the 11 car is not eligible for Chip Ganassi Racing as far as the entrant standings for the top 22. But man, I mean, what a drive by him. Iowa coming up. And Callum Ilott had some good results at the start of the year, but Agustin Canapino is right there with Ilott nearly every week. In fact, he finished ahead of him this race. They're trying to put together a deal for next year as far as what Ricardo Juncos is trying to do as far as getting Canapino back with the team, and they're working on sponsorship for that, according to MarshallPruittRacer.com. But just 2 phenomenal drives by both those drivers this weekend.
For everybody on board, Callum Ilott is going to greener pastures next season. He's only 41 points ahead of Agustin Canapino and 4 spots in the standings. 2 of the last 4 races, Canapino has outperformed Callum Ilott. And it's an interesting dynamic with that team that it just seems to be some tension that is, for the team's credit, doing as best as it possibly can to bury that stuff. But we've seen signs and comments and indications here or there that all is not well with that dynamic. But for everybody thinking Callum Ilott is a slam dunk to go elsewhere because of his talent, I'd temper that enthusiasm because I don't think he's shown what he needs to show this year. And I think evidence of that is how Agustin Canapino has raced comparable or even better than Callum Ilott over the last 4 or so races. And it's impressive. Even in the first 2 races when Callum Ilott had his only 2 top 10s, those were top 12 performances by Agustin Canapino. So he's been absolutely tremendous. It is a big weekend for him in the sense that he can make some headway in the Rookie of the Year standings with Marcus Armstrong, considering he's not racing this weekend, of course, on the ovals. So with a couple halfway decent results, he can really close the gap to Marcus Armstrong, and who knows? He still has a path to Rookie of the Year, which none of us would have expected at the start of the season based on his unfamiliarity with the discipline of open-wheel cars.
So right now he's 43 points behind Marcus Armstrong for Rookie of the Year, and we have 3 oval races left. So to put that in perspective as far as points go, I mean, you finish 16th, 16th, and 15th, so mid-pack, you're what? Let's see, that puts you at like 51. That puts you ahead, right? So this Iowa weekend and Gateway are going to be critical for Augustine Canapino in the Rookie of the Year, and it's not just winning Rookie of the Year is something you put on your resume. Like I'm pretty sure there's a monetary impact here, so that would be big for a small team like Juncos,
especially when it's trying to put together its effort for next year for Canapino. If he can win Rookie of the Year, you can guarantee not just that money, but also the interest from people is going to expand. If you're saying, hey, Augustine Canapino, Rookie of the Year, 2023 in IndyCar, come support his effort in 2024.
And Marcus Armstrong's been really solid. He was 7th over the weekend, but again, not doing the ovals. So I picked Armstrong as my Rookie of the Year only because I thought he was with the top team, and there was still the chance at the beginning of the year he could do Iowa and Gateway. Now that's not happening. Takuma Sato back in the car this weekend for him for the Hy-Vee doubleheader. But man, this is going to be a fascinating race. You mentioned it. Focus more on the top 22 with leader circle and entrant points. I'd also say the Rookie of the Year race is going to really ramp up after the Iowa weekend, and that will be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I can't wait. You look like the smart one at the beginning of the season, picking Marcus Armstrong for Rookie of the Year. It doesn't happen very often, but very impressive.
Yes. What is your number 3?
Well, let's talk about Tom Blomqvist. You only saw him for a split second towards the beginning of the race because of the melee that we saw, and unfortunately he was caught up in that. But overall, throughout the weekend, qualified decently, 20th, for a guy that was just learning the track and just learning the cars, did time in the cars. But when we look at the future of Meyer Shank Racing, and Tom Blomqvist, by all indications, will be part of it next year on the IndyCar side, I thought he represented himself well prior to the race, and that was out of his control, really, but learned on the fly, decent job, didn't wreck cars, didn't put it in the wall during practice or qualifying. Just a solid job by a guy that has Augustine Canapino attributes in the sense that he has a lot of racing experience. This is a guy that's close to 30 years old. So when you look at Scott McLaughlin and you look at Augustine Canapino, guys that, maybe don't have a lot of time in single-seat open-wheel cars, but do have a lot of race time, that is going to pay dividends for Tom Blomqvist going forward. And I thought you wish we would have seen more of him in the race itself, but I thought it was a pretty solid performance from him on Friday and Saturday.
Yes, and in the growth, so qualifying, you can't really look at the lap times as far as the quick lap time, but in session 1, he was second to last at 103.79. And then practice 2, you gain over a second, 102.69. So you've gained 1.1 seconds. I mean, that's phenomenal growth. And if there's a race to start on for an IndyCar driver for the first time, I think Texas, right? And then any street circuit are really, really tough because
unforgiving.
Yeah. You don't have, Texas is just, it's high banked. It's fast. If you don't have oval experience, woof. If you're a driver used to road courses and a lot of runoff, and then you have a street circuit like a Toronto or a St. Pete or Nashville, so on and so forth, like that's also really, really tough. So I agree. I thought he handled himself well. It's unfortunate we didn't get a chance to see what he can do in the race, but he showed fairly well in qualifying. I just think I'm hopeful I'm hopeful he will have an opportunity again later this season, but I want to clarify, not at the expense of Simon Pageant. I'd be thrilled if there's a third card or some other option to give him another start. Maybe perhaps like at the season finale or something like that. But it's good to see him in a car. We expect him to be in a car full time next year, and we'll see what happens moving forward.
At the very least, it was a good introduction to Tom Blomqvist for those like me that don't watch IMSA and stuff like that to get to know him. So it was a good weekend for him. Of course, he wanted to get laps on Sunday. That would have been very advantageous. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but to no fault of his own. So I thought he made a good first impression in the paddock and on fans based on what he was able to do with the limited expectations of coming into Toronto.
Absolutely. All right, that wraps up our recap of Toronto and the Honda Indy Toronto. Move ahead to preview what's coming up this weekend in IndyCars. We have a doubleheader at Iowa, and again, Free Friday coming up this weekend for fans. They'll have a pit stop competition, so they'll have the Hy-Vee Homefront 250 first on Saturday. So a look at the sessions, 3:15 to 4 Eastern on Friday, 4:30 to 6 Eastern on Friday is IndyCar Series practice, Peacock, IndyCar Live, SiriusXM, IndyCar Radio. Then we'll have IndyCar qualifying Saturday morning, so 9:30 to 10:30 Eastern, but you got to remember Central Time, that's 8:30 to 9:30. That's very early. It'll be 2 laps. Again, lap 1 for race 1, lap 2 for race 2. And then the race on Saturday, we'll have the TV window. It's short. It's from 3 to 5, but on NBC. And then, so that tells me we'll have green flag, basically right at the top of the broadcast. And then on
your favorite.
Sunday, 11:05 to 11:30, they'll have a warm-up session. And then the TV window from 2 to 5 on Sunday. So look at the schedule for this weekend. Hy-Vee Homefront 250, and then in race number 2, you have the Hy-Vee. Let's see if I can get the name. One Step 250. So also really cool. So they'll have some University of Iowa dignitaries on hand for this weekend.
Ooh.
Caitlin Clark is the Grand Marshal for Saturday's race, and then Kirk Ferentz is the Grand Marshal for Sunday's race. So that's pretty exciting.
Very nice. It's Saturday that Ed Sheeran, he will be the honorary starter for one of the races. On Saturday, it's Carrie Underwood and Kenny Chesney bookending the race. Sunday, it will be Zach Brown-Band and Ed Sheeran. Pretty solid lineup.
Yeah, right? Loaded weekend of concerts. I saw they put in another big hospitality tent thing that I guess may impact the view of turn 3 on the oval for people in the grandstand, but Hy-Vee's going all out.
Infield?
Yes.
The hospitality tent then?
Yes. Hy-Vee's going all out for this, so I hope that this does not, impact fans as far as their thoughts on what you can and can't see, but this is a big event. I'm hopeful that the crowd will show up because the weather looks a lot cooler than it was last year when it was like, mid-90s? It's looking like mid-80s.
You had a lot of people that were under the grandstand last year when they were baking on the aluminum there. So, yeah, it's a lot friendlier. You think July in the Midwest, in Iowa, you never know what you're going to get. Last year, you were baking. This year, a little bit more comfortable this weekend, which is going to be great.
Yes, a lot better than what we've seen in recent years. So that's a preview of Iowa. Who do you like in the races this weekend? I mean, I think we both like Joseph Newgarden to win one of them, right?
Yes, I think that was what I was going to say. I was just going to be annoying and say Alex Palou is going to win both of them. But I will say, when you look at Alex Palou's performance last year, 13th and 6th, and before that in 2020, the 2 races, 14th and 11th. So has yet to finish in the top 5, let alone a podium, let alone a win at Iowa. But the way he's racing, it could very well be this weekend. I'm going Joseph Newgarden to win one of them, and I'm going to go Pato Award to win another.
So the same guys as last year.
Yeah, pretty much. Which, I mean, the dominance of Joseph Newgarden at Iowa is like, you can't ignore it.
Right?
Right? So you feel like he's just going to come in and dominate like he usually does. Was caught up in what? In race 2 last year, was caught up in an incident. That's why he didn't win, basically. but started second in both races last year, had a pole in 2020, started second in the other race in 2020. Like, it's just been a dominant performance by Joseph Newgarden at this track. His last several starts at Iowa, second, first, second, third, second, are his last, 6 starts at Iowa. Just a guy in a team that's always seemingly locked in from getting off the transporter at Iowa. So I'm going to go, I'll go a repeat of last year, Newgarden and O'Ward.
So you talked about some interesting stats. So Chad 200 with our 3 key stats for Iowa. Dixon and Power combined 32 starts, 9 poles, 17 top 5s, 364 laps led, 8 podiums, 0 wins. Palou, Herta, and Rossi combined 17 starts, no top 5s, 4 laps led. So that changes one of my picks. And then you went through Newgarden's Iowa finishes. And then a bonus on Joseph Newgarden. Laps led in the last 9 Iowa races. Newgarden, 1,506. Second place, Castroneves, 267. Third is Will Power, 202. Pagano with 98. Award, 97. Sato, 57. So total laps led in the last 7 Iowa races. Penske, over 1,600, 1,617. McLaren, 152. Rahal, 65. Ganassi, 42. Ed Carpenter Racing, 38. Andretti, 11. Remember, Andretti dominated this race in the early days when Iowa came back on board. But it's been Penske dominated since. So I'll go Joseph Newgarden for one of them because I think that's a safe pick. And man, for the other one, I was going to pick Colton Herta, but based on those results, I can't do it. I'm going to go with Scott Dixon, right? He's going to win a race eventually. So I'll go with Scott Dixon.
He's going to win a race at Iowa eventually, right?
Right? Yeah. It's one of the few places he hasn't won. So that's what I'm going to go with for this weekend. If you agree or disagree with our picks or anything we had to say about Toronto, please let us know. You can find us at IndyCar Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Just search for New Track Record. You can also email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. Plus, you can find us, newtrackrecordpodcast.com on the website. Catch up on all the episodes. Also, we have t-shirts and stickers for sale. Thanks to those supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord, Xavier, Rob, Stitch, and several others for their support each and every month. And you can support us starting at just $1 a month, so very cost-effective for you. And as always, you can listen in for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, any kind of podcasting platform you prefer, you can find us on there. All right, time for news and notes, and let's start with Rate the Race for Toronto. How would you rate the Toronto race?
I was thinking about this on my long trek from Colorado, and I had a lot of time to myself to think about things, good or bad, and I give it a 7.5.
Okay, I'm going to go slightly better. I'm going to go an 8. I thought it was a good race. It was entertaining.
I thought it was a good race, and I thought NBC did a great job in having the pulse of the race and what was going on. And sometimes we criticize NBC and say, man, if they just had Jan Beekes in there to kind of break it down for us. But I think they've done a really good job this year in really having the pulse of the race and strategies and all that stuff. I really look at some of those guys as really being able to step up their game in terms of following that stuff. So I thought it was a great race, and I thought it was presented pretty damn well by NBC.
Well, Peacock, but yes.
Yes, well, they're the NBC folks.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. In fact, they did this strategy A and B. That was a new graphic. They've done in the the in-lap, out-lap stuff. I mean, that's always good data to have after pit stops. I really thought they did a great job covering this event. For those of you who refuse to sign up for Peacock, and yes, I get it, Peacock just went up or is going up by $1 a month next month, but I mean, it's really good stuff. Let's get to the ratings. Missy K. Rice gave it a 10. H. Sabedra gave it a 9 out of 10. Yellow's really made these strategy calls a matter of gambling and ending up on the podium or ending up deep in the field. Audi F1 Engines, new follower, 7, plenty of action from the back section. Daniel SEM 2004 gave it an 8, enough chaos and action to keep it interesting. Jay Buller 1982 gave it an 8.7. Again, I love when people do the decimal points. You get more particular, like, yes, props to you. Fit J 1983 Driving around slow with a badly broken wing and not being passed on equal tires should never happen. Once everyone is on equal tires, it was a bore. Don't see a rating there, though. In-cap team 185, 10. Love to see Graham move all the way up to P9 and Christian come away with the victory for RLL. Big Rahal fan. Big D Kart gave it a 9. IndyCar delivers race after race. Vicky Lane 26 also gave it a 9. Strategy calls for Dixon and Scotty Mack made no sense to me. Then Palou's wing nearly falling off. I was watching those last laps through my fingers. Lots of action throughout the race in the field. 2 thumbs up. Hunter's Way 67 gave it an 8. First time winner. On-track pass for the lead. Action mid-pack plus mayhem at the start. Gotta love IndyCar. Run_Mark_run on Twitter gave it an 8 peacocks out of the 10. That's great. Limited commercials were really great. Yeah, look, I get it. Everyone complains, who watches F1, who comes over to IndyCar. Too many commercials. I think they had one commercial break that was during green flag running on Sunday. Beans.
Yeah, and the beauty of it was when you watched not live, and I watched after the fact, because I always do, is you didn't miss anything in terms of, it was like a pre, you didn't have to watch all the commercials, basically. It was like a 30-second break, and then it immediately picked up coming back out of the break. But I thought there were maybe 4 breaks during the entire race, which is pretty damn good. I don't know. You're never going to have anybody be happy, 100% happy, and other than no commercials anytime like F1, which is just not realistic.
No, it's not. Beans B Card blog gave it a 9 because of the multiple strategies and track action. Could have been a 10 if Palou hadn't finished second. NK Harden gave it a 9. Bunch of different strategies, action all over the track. Guys going from front to back to front. Penske and Ganassi making stupid strategy calls. It somehow ended up looking better with a bunch of guys coming in on the last lap. Fun all race long. Go away, Palou. Phil_Barksdale gave it a 7. Dock points for a first lap pileup and Penske's strategy call, taking McLaughlin out of the fight for the win at the end. Jeremy from HBG gave it a 9. And whoever does the wraps for chip scars deserves a bonus because the wrap was the only thing holding that wing on. I would agree. Also had to say this, couple of driver points after crashing out 5 of 10 races this year. No way Grosjean is in that Andretti seat next year. And if Harvey makes it to the end of the season, I will be shocked. A mannequin would get the same or better results. Ouch.
Yeah, Jack Harvey's been a non-factor. I mean, he caused that issue at the beginning of the race.
And Grosjean self-imploded.
Grosjean, crashing again and blaming anybody else but himself.
Yeah, blaming the steering wheel.
If you lose control of the steering wheel, there's nobody else to blame,
Right?
But he tries to find a way.
Yes. Each and every week. So that's Rate the Race. Yeah. I give it an 8. Yeah. The first lap pile up, maybe take away from that. And then nothing happening with Palou. I think I almost take away, but first time winner. I mean, I love first time winners. You had teams making mistakes, as we mentioned on strategy. It was a very entertaining race. I enjoyed it. Would have been higher if you had more challenging, for the lead at the end. But other than that, I mean, really no complaints. I enjoy Toronto. Most years we get an entertaining race. You posted this poll, I believe. Favorite non-Long Beach IndyCar street race. Nearly 57% of you said St. Pete. Nearly 22% said Nashville. 13.5% said Toronto. Over 8% said Detroit. A few replies. Zaxi8771. I like St. Pete more than Long Beach. I think I think newer fans like St. Pete more than Long Beach. I think St. Pete is it catching up to Long Beach? Because I think St. Pete being the season opener, I mean, it's become a huge event in the last 5 years.
I think a lot of that has to do, or at least some of it has to do with the fact that it's the season opener.
Yeah.
It is a huge event, but also just the excitement that, hey, the IndyCar season's starting, I think helps its cause. But I agree with more people. More new fans that maybe don't know or appreciate the history of Long Beach are bigger fans of St. Pete. And that's okay, whatever. But I thought it was an interesting, I think majority of people are still going to say Long Beach, but what's that second most popular street course? Because when you look upon it, a lot of positivity with every street race that IndyCar has. Long Beach, of course, St. Pete has grown in popularity. You look at Toronto growing in popularity. The excitement around Nashville is still big, particularly if some things can happen next year that are being considered and that we've heard about. And, the rejuvenation, I think, of the Detroit Grand Prix, moving it around the Renaissance Center. So when you look at the street course races for IndyCar right now, there's not one that you look at like, okay, it's fledgling and its best days are behind it, and who knows if it's around in 2 or 3 more years. I mean, all 5 of them you look at are on pretty solid ground.
Yeah, I think that's a testament now. If only IndyCar could figure that out for ovals outside the Indy 500.
Yeah. Can't have everything, Caleb.
Yeah, that's true. This from Hunter's Way 67 voted St. Pete, but it used to be Toronto until they jacked up the pit lane and ruined the turns 9, 10, 11 complex. I'm surprised he didn't say Long Beach because he's from California. So it caught me.
Right.
Well, I mean, I guess it's favorite non-Long Beach, so you had to make a choice. But I mean, yeah, it's still surprising. P. Gaynor 14 voted Nashville because I've been. It was a fun event. Would have voted Detroit if it was still Belle Isle. Yeah, Nashville's fun. I'll be curious how the new track comes together. More on that a bit later on. Beans B-Card blog. I said St. Pete because it's one of the most I'm excited for. However, its place in the schedule is a great deal to do with that. Yeah, it's kind of what we discussed. And then this one, Jeff Cerneski. I would have voted, but I did not see Cleveland on the poll. Hashtag Berkeley Lakefront Airport. Yeah, shout out to Baltimore. I'm going to throw that one into the mix as well.
Yes.
Baltimore was a good event.
For Boston. All the great races they had at Boston.
Yeah. Qingdao, China. Hawaiian Super Prix.
yes, absolutely.
For our people who are newer to IndyCar, please look up those events. You'll go through an interesting rabbit hole.
That's exciting.
Of non-starter IndyCar events. Elsewhere on the mailbag this week, this from Shinichi XF1. So I had to translate this, but this is from several weeks ago about Blomqvist and then a current Chip Ganassi driver, being with Meyer-Shank Racing next year full time. Sato will reach 50 years of age and will continue running. This man is not normal. If that's the route they go,
that's for sure.
Which is what we expect to happen. I thought that was pretty funny. Let's see. A couple other things to get to as far as Toronto. This from Daniel SEM 2004. The only thing that put a question mark on the race, talking about Toronto, was COVID. It's always been a big event with lots of fans, even with the expansion of Exhibition Place. There's talk of moving it to another part of Toronto. So really, it's just like the COVID delay, though, in a way has rejuvenated the event somehow.
Yeah, it's kind of, absence makes the heart grow fonder type thing. Didn't have it for a couple of years, comes back, and it's been back-to-back just humongous events in Toronto. It's awesome to see.
Meanwhile, this from NK Harden. The team that was easily the worst on the grid through the 500 is now match Andretti Autosport for third most team wins on the season. Incredible turnaround the last few weeks. Yeah, we can't say it enough, right? I mean, it's been phenomenal to see what Rahal's done. Between Mid-Ohio and their qualifying pace, and then a pole and a win at Toronto.
And I think one thing that I don't think can be overlooked here, and we discussed it with Graham Rahal, or he talked about it, about what he does next year and beyond, and we said, well, what team out there is even gonna want Graham Rahal? But I think with the success the team has found and the improvement, I don't think there's any question right now that Graham Rahal's back with this team next year.
Yeah,
and that's a marked change from what we were hearing the last 2 months.
Yes, and I think, you look at Iowa, if they can figure out the ovals, which is still a question mark, mind you, if they can figure that out starting this weekend, yeah, why would he leave? Because I think you're looking at a team that has a young star, you have the old veteran, and then it's TBA, right, with what happens with that third seat for next year. But there's a lot of buzz with this team, and I think you have a lot of positive things to hang your hat on. This poll, I think I posted, you'll be watching Toronto on Peacock. Thankfully, a lot of you said yes, nearly 97% of you. Some funny replies, though. Daniel Ingleton said yes, but on Sky Sports F1. Vicky Lynn 26, yes, but on TSN, not Peacock. M. Rusamarov, I would if I had Peacock and think they're out of the country. And then R. Cole, yes, but can I still complain? Yes, you can. You can.
It was amazing. There was only one letter to the mailbag, to Marshall Pruitt's mailbag, complaining about Peacock. So with every passing year, we seem to have less and less complaints and grumbling and overall vitriol towards Peacock, which is great to see. People are adjusting accordingly.
This from Mom 2X over 2002. I don't know, maybe it's me, but if you are a city that knows you're hosting an IndyCar race, when you want to make sure for the year before your streets being used look good, smooth, not super patched, especially since they will be on TV. You know, there's a lot of complaints about the streets early on in the weekend. I don't think that was really a factor, though, come race time. I mean, look, I get it.
It's a bumpy track.
Yeah, it's a bumpy track. It's a very cold weather climate. They're doing the best they can. I feel like it's the same with Detroit, right? You find a way to make it work.
Well, that's the thing is it's a major metropolitan city. What is Toronto, like top 20 in the world?
Probably.
Metropolitan area? They got a lot of things going on other than, oh, man, we got to make sure we pave those stretches of road that are going to be used for the IndyCar race. It's a street race. Those are the elements you're going to have, you know, where you have concrete canyons and you're going from asphalt to concrete in places. And yes, there's going to be manholes, covers, and maybe a dip here or there. Like, I think that's part of the challenge. That's part of the adjustment that the drivers need to make. Everything's not going to be smooth and tidy and great like on a road course or something. So, no, I appreciate that element. I don't think you can't have, you know, the track, you know, the road falling apart or anything, but at the same time, who cares if it's bumpy? It's just another challenge.
Biggest city in Canada by far, obviously, and a huge hub for a lot of things, not just, you know, because of the Great Lakes, but internationally as well. So, I mean, they're doing the best they can. Also, this from Arcole, rare sighting of an IndyCar ad in the wild in the Deep South, #sponsor activation. And it was Firestone. And there's a NTT IndyCar Series logo with Firestone, you know, official tire. So, I mean, you get that in NASCAR country, that's a big win.
Yeah, big time.
So that wraps up. Oh, wait, we got one more entry on Rate the Race from ST Vind 70, 9.5 from Stephen Watkins as far as Toronto goes. But a lot of good stuff on the mailbag. Thanks everyone for the mailbag. Time now for news and notes. A few things to get to that we missed. Juncos Hollinger Racing, Matthew Brabham will be in the series formerly known as Indy Lights this weekend as he will drive the Iowa race. This comes after they announced that Matteo Nannini parted ways. They parted ways with him for the rest of the season. He won the IMS road course race, so bit of a surprise there. Also, Juncos teasing a big announcement coming this Friday, so we shall see what happens with that. We mentioned Takuma Sato will be in action this weekend. Unfortunately, Simon Pagenaud still sidelined with a concussion for Iowa, so Connor Daly will be back in the car. We wish Simon the best in his recovery. Also, we have, Linus Lundqvist. Hopeful he'll be on the grid for at least a race, maybe two, maybe even three at the end of the season. Says he's waiting on a contract to be sent over, wants to be on the track soon. This would include Gateway and at least Portland and Laguna Seca. So several teams asking him, you know, what he can do. And the team in play asked if he could do an oval and a road race and throw in maybe another race. So he says, ideally finish out the 3 remaining races. That from Marshall Pruitt of Racer.com. What team would it be? He's tested with Rahal, did an oval test, did a road course test with Ed Carpenter Racing. Who would it be? I find this fascinating. Is it one of those two teams, or is it another team we're not talking about?
I look if I had to pick a front runner, I'm saying Rahal Letterman Lanigan. Is it at the expense of Jack Harvey towards the end of the season? Maybe. Is it an additional car? I'm just glad to see Linus Lundqvist, what it sounds like, get a shot. And I hope it's multiple races. I hope it's not just one. I think the guy needs multiple races to show what he could potentially do at the IndyCar level. So if I had to pick a team right now, I'm going ROL.
I'm going to go with Ed Carpenter only because, you know, I feel like there could be a chance that they go with Lundqvist over Ryan Hunter-Reay in that seat, you know, finishing out the year at some point if there's a conflict or just if things aren't going well. But I think Ryan Hunter-Reay will be an interesting driver to watch at Iowa this weekend, right? Because he's had a lot of success there, won a couple times in the past. He's really good on short ovals. Maybe not Joseph Newgarden good, but in his heyday, 10 years ago, he was the short oval ace. So that will be fun to see. And yeah, I get that it's testing, but he did lead the test that they had back at Iowa the other month. So he'll be a fascinating person to watch this weekend.
A lot of storylines heading into Iowa.
Elsewhere on news and notes, and this perhaps maybe the biggest thing that we got headed our way. Tony Donahue reporting it first. Adam Stern also reporting it. IndyCar in advanced talks to move its season finale and banquet to Nashville with the Music City GP starting as soon as next year. I did hear and read that Kevin Lee on trackside kind of poo-pooed this, so I don't know what will happen, but this is fascinating nonetheless.
So when you look at, to me, it makes sense. Nashville is a little bit more exciting to me than Monterey, California. We go through the Laguna Seca is what it is. It's not a very exciting race. Whereas Nashville, it's chaos. So maybe you don't want that as your last race, but it is what it is. But I think the Nashville metro area, when you look at the excitement of racing around that, not just IndyCar, I think it's a pretty cool place to have your final race and if you're schmoozing sponsors and all that stuff. Now, my question would be, is it still around middle of September? Because you have the NFL starting and the Titans playing. You would probably have to adjust your schedule week or year to year to make sure it's on a weekend that the Titans are not playing. But what does it say about Laguna Seca going up long term? If Laguna Seca drops off, does anybody, other than it being a race and you don't want to lose races, is anybody losing sleep over losing Laguna Seca? I'm not.
I will be curious if this race, now remember they had the repave, right? So that will be interesting to see. But also how the crowds look like, because crowds struggle. I feel like there was an uptick last year. I'll be very curious if there's an uptick this year. That's a race that I feel like needs to draw bigger crowds for us to feel like it is on solid ground moving forward. It's great that IndyCar returned there. And we did see good racing last year at the end. It's just there's usually not good racing at the front.
You want your final race of the season to have a lot more excitement with asses in the seats and excitement on track and all that, more than what Laguna Seca can deliver. Nobody was showing up at Sonoma the last couple of years, and hardly anybody's been showing up at Laguna Seca. It doesn't feel like an exclamation point to the end of your season. It just feels like a race that is there, and it's a good area to schmooze sponsors. But it just doesn't have what's going to hit more is bringing people to a mostly empty raceway to have your season finale, but it's a good area for sponsors and all that stuff, or actually having a legitimate event where there's a ton of people there and it has big event energy like a Nashville. I feel like it's Nashville. But at the same time, do you want to mess with the date equity that is Nashville? Do they really want to go from August to September? So I think those are all pretty interesting questions, and how that comes about and what happens to Laguna Seca long term and how that works for Nashville and the new course with Nashville. Does it tie in with that? Who knows? But it sounds like at the very least, IndyCar and Nashville are considering this.
Yeah, it has to be downtown, right? And ideally you incorporate part of Broadway, because that will get an insane amount of buzz. And then you factor in the point that the issue with Laguna Seca is that it's so far away from the Midwest, where the core of your fan base is. I get there are a lot of race fans in California, but Nashville is a lot more accessible to people from Indiana and Ohio and Illinois and Michigan and Kentucky, places like that. It's a lot more accessible than California. So you're going from, flying, across the country to driving distance for your core fan base, being 4, 5, 6 hours away for the bulk of it. I mean, that's a huge step forward as far as getting fans to come to the finale.
Especially when you're looking at the epicenter of IndyCar, its breadbasket, like we've said, is in the Midwest. If you finish your season in the Midwest, does that make a hell of a lot more sense than doing it in front of a lot of empty seats out in California.
Yeah. Well, and not necessarily seats, right? But just empty viewing mounds.
Yeah.
Since they don't
viewing mounds,
operate
for sure.
with seats
it's
there.
Not a good look. We can say that. The season finale race event should look a hell of a lot better than it does at Laguna Seca.
Couple of other updates. IndyCar and Delora have worked together to develop and produce a strengthened rear wheel bearing retaining nut to debut at the Iowa doubleheader. This is good news. This in response to what happened with Kyle Kirkwood's car at Indy after he went airborne and the tire flying off. This is good. I think the interesting thing is how this impact pit stops this weekend. That's the thing that I think remains to be seen, and I'm sure we'll get more info on that through the practice sessions as well. But that's a good safety update. Also, Robert Wickens in the 2024 Indy 500. Still maybe a pipe dream, but Nathan Brown of the Indy Star is saying, all we need is a test, money, and then a test, and then a lot more money. That from Brian Herta. Good read from Nathan Brown of the Indy Star talking about that. They're still working to try to put that together. And then speaking of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Goodyear is going to have a tire test for NASCAR on the oval after the race weekend on the road course. Look, all signs point to the oval coming back for next year. The fact that IMS social media keeps showing highlights and throwbacks of moments on the oval, it's back for next year. You can't convince me otherwise. But for this year, Shane Van Gisbergen is back. He'll be back with Trackhouse in the Project 91 entry. Also, Brody Kostecki, who's Supercars champion as well. Jensen Button, former F1 driver, and Kamui Kobayashi will also be in the Cup Series race. I think Connor Daly's participating that weekend as well. So just a wild list of drivers for that race weekend.
And potentially, we talked about it with Toronto, is being away a couple years, infuse some energy and excitement into that event. Could we see that at least maybe not as dramatic and drastic as Toronto, but could we see that a little bit with moving Cup back onto the oval? I'm kind of excited to see them back on the oval, and then, midway through the race, you'd be like, wow, this is still boring as hell, but I think there's something to be said about maybe it going away for a couple of years and maybe drumming up some excitement with it coming back next year.
So I have to correct myself. He's not a champion, but he's won 2 races this season. So he's one of the top drivers in the series. Either way, it's a good addition. Yeah. And it'll be his first Cup start.
And the thing with is what did you mention before, the Robert Wickens thing?
Yeah.
Weren't we told that he had a ride at McLaren when he wanted it?
Right?
Is that no longer a thing now?
I find that interesting. Well, and is it different? Because is he still, like, you see him at some race weekends with McLaren. I haven't noticed him, though, this year. Have you? He was at Indy.
I noticed him a couple times. Yeah, there.
But was he there in Toronto? Weird. I didn't catch it. If I missed it,
it's usually when I see him, he's in the background or something when they're showing the grid or whatever. Is usually when I see him, and I swear I've seen him a couple times this year. But I was always under the impression that McLaren said, "Hey, when you're back, when you're ready, there'll be a car waiting for you." Is that no longer the case? Apparently.
And does it change because he's a driver for Brian Herta Autosport? And does that change? Would he be more an Andretti driver as opposed to a McLaren driver? I don't know. I don't know how it works. Is he still an advisor with McLaren? Because there was an interesting note in the mailbag that Zach Veach is doing sim work for McLaren. He's hanging around the team this year as well, doing Chevy sim work, but I'm not sure. So anyone who knows better, please let us know on the socials. All right. I think that covers everything. Let's see. Tweets of the week. Just one tweet from Tony DeZeno. Also, who has Lundgaard winning a race before Dixon, Power, or any McLaren driver this year? Crazy. I think that sums up what happened in Toronto this weekend.
It was cool to see, refreshing to see, and a team that hadn't won in 3 years with all the struggles that they've had get a dub. It was pretty cool.
Random split air driver of the week time.
All right, we're going to 2004 and kart and going with Yaroslav Yanis.
Who?
From Czechoslovakia. Went, I think, by Jarek Yanis during his time in kart, but it was one and done. And not just one season, mind you. One race and done in the Champ Car World Series with Dale Coyne Racing. One race, the Surfers Paradise race and finished 16th in that race. And looking at Giannis from Czechoslovakia, did some GT work and won the 2006 GT Championship. Done Formula 3000. Did some European racing with let's see, the Touring Wagon Masters, which is one of your favorite racing series overseas.
Isn't that kind of the precursor to British GT, or am I thinking of a different series?
Part of like Formula Ford stuff too, and all that. But basically, made his Champ Car debut for Coyne in that penultimate race of 2004 of its Surfers Paradise. Also did some Formula Nippon in Japan in 2005, and that was it. He was one and done, and Dale Coyne always a fertile ground for random split-era drivers of the week. And this was a guy that did one race in Champ Car in 2004, and that was it.
What a lineup for Coyne. You had Oriol Servia do all the races, and then the other car, the 19 car, Tarso Marquez, did 3 races. Yep. Gaston Mezequin, who I think is a previous random split-air driver of the week, did the bulk of them. And then Jarek Janis did just that one race. American Medical Response, the sponsor, which AMR Safety Team. There you go.
Hey, there you are. So, yeah, very, very fascinating guy. Who knows what the situation was? Did he have enough money for one race? Did they just need somebody that was around Australia? Was he around? Who knows? But a guy that appeared in just one race in Australia at Surfers Paradise, 16th in that race out of 19 starters. And he finished in front of a couple other future random split-era drivers of the week, but also Oriol Servia, who finished last in that race, which is pretty amazing. Or didn't qualify, is what is the thing. But Jarek Janis finished 18th overall out of 19 starters. Alex Tagliani went out earlier than that. But Jarek Janis, his one race, had gearbox issues on lap 28 and finished 18th overall.
And the first of Sebastian Bourdais' 4 straight titles. What's interesting, and I always find humorous, so this is the first year post-kart where it's Champ Car, but this was the Bridgestone presents the Champ Car World Series powered by Ford. Just love the long title. Love it.
Amazing.
Rookie of the year, AJ Allmendinger.
Paradise, Junqueira for Newman Haas. They finished 1-2 with Sebastian Bourdais finishing second.
Was that or am I thinking of a year earlier? There was a crazy rain race at Surfers. Was that crazy year, or was that a couple years before?
I think it was the year before.
Okay.
I believe. Was the 03 race, because it was in dry conditions, this race. Yes.
But yeah, I've never heard of this driver. You found another. Yes, it was 2003. The 2003 Lexmark Indy 300. That was won by Bourdais. It was shortened and was the final kart event because the King Taco 500 canceled due to wildfires at California Speedway.
That's right. So just when we think we're running out of random split-era drivers of the week, we find one to deliver with one Jaroslav Janis, this week's random split-era driver of the week.
And it was actually Ryan Hunter-Reay getting the win at Surfers that was shortened, that had a long red flag period due to a hailstorm. Caused an hour-long red flag. So there we go. A little bit of open wheel racing history for you there. All right, well, that wraps it up. Next week, we'll be back, and I believe Justin will be back in studio in time as we'll recap this weekend's doubleheader weekend at Iowa Speedway. We'll see what happens and how wrong our picks are next week. For Justin Kinney, I'm Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.